handled. What's up, fellas? Good to see everybody again for yet another episode of the Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. I'm talking really fast because this is going to be a 9-hour podcast as we break down the possible draft picks we have coming up. When was the last time we had 8 picks in a draft? I can't tell you that. So real quick with the intros before we kick it off. Top left is Mark. He hails as Ohm. Top right is Neo. He is better known as Bob. Bottom left is Paul. You can find him as Canadian Hog. Bottom right is Boone. Real name is John, and I am Silent Threat, or Derek, or that idiot that doesn't know what he's talking about half the time. So feel free to come up, have some fun, mix it up. Please join the board, react, leave some comments on YouTube, subscribe, all the good stuff that everybody else does on their social media. So I guess this is a quick draft pod. I say quick draft pod as we break down some positions. And we figure we'll just tee this thing up and get it rolling because this might be a long one. I think collectively the 5 of us believes the most important position that we're going to be looking at is going to be offensive line. If anybody says I'm wrong, feel free to keep your mouth shut. And Paul, I think you were tasked with the O line, so I'm going to tee you up. I think I know who you're going to pick first, so I'll put some highlights up and I'll let you run away with it, brother.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to talk about offensive line. Before I start talking about some of the players, I do just want to give a little bit of an overview about the current state of our offensive line and kind of explain why I think it's important that we place a lot of importance on this position in the draft. So by the end of 2024, we're projected to have 6 offensive linemen off our books. In addition to that, we have 3 linemen who have been pretty important for us over the last few years, and Leno, Cornelius Lucas, and Andrew Norwell, who have 8 or more years of experience. So, I mean, those guys are showing signs of wear and tear. They're a little long in the tooth. And we got another 3 linemen that have less than 3 years of experience in Chris Paul, Sam Cosme, and Sadiq Charles. And none of those guys to this point have really inspired any confidence in our team. I mean, Cosme was a second-round pick, but he hasn't lived up to that to this point. So there's serious questions in regards to that as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we have a definite need for talent infusion along the offensive line. Priority number 1 has to be to set Sam Howell up for success. And you can't do that without stability along that offensive line. So I, for one, would not be disappointed. In fact, I would applaud it if we pick 2 guys on the offensive line within day 1 and day 2. The one thing that stuck out to me when I reflected back on our offensive line is the fact that there's not a Mr. Reliable anymore. We used to always be able to have a Mr. Reliable, whether it was Brandon Sheriff, regardless of what you thought about him, or Trent Williams or Chris Samuel. There was always a reliable cog on our offensive line. And if you look at our line right now from left to right, we're projected to put out Charles Leno, potentially Chris Paul or Andrew Norwell at left guard, Roulier or Nick Gates at center, Cosme at right guard, and Andrew Wiley at right tackle. There's no model of consistency there, none whatsoever. I mean, we've seen these guys play well in spurts, but there isn't consistency there, either from a level of play or from a durability standpoint. So we really have to focus on finding trust and reliability along our offensive line in this coming draft. So in focusing on players, I tried to identify players that we can count on, guys that can come in fairly soon and fairly quickly and give us that sense of reliability that we're desperately seeking along our offensive line. So the first guy that I'm going to talk about is an offensive guard from Florida, goes by the name of Osiris Torrance. He's considered probably to be the very best guard prospect in the 2023 draft. He's the kind of guy that, based on mock drafts and things that I've read, he should be a player that is available there at spot 16, I believe, or he can also be a guy that we potentially consider trading a bit down in the first round to potentially grab. So he's 6'5", he's 330 pounds. He's a very large man, and that's going to be a theme in the players that I talk about today. they're all mammoth guys. They're huge guys, and that seems to be something that the team has been interested in, especially when you look at who we've visited with and who we've planned private visits with. They're all offensive linemen that are just massive, huge bodies. So Torrance played 3 years at Louisiana. He was a raging Cajun. Interesting fact about this guy is in his entire career, he has not given up a sack as an interior lineman. He played his first 3 years at Louisiana, but then transferred to Florida for his senior year. And even with a stronger conference, improved, in more quality play in that conference, he still played outstanding as a senior. He's got a lot of experience, 48 college games. He's played over 3,000 snaps. And that's really been a theme with Ron Rivera teams. We seem to draft guys that have a lot of college experience for the most part. I mean, there's always an exception or two, but he certainly checks that box. He's a really nasty player. He's considered to be absolutely dominant in the run game. He's received comparables to Larry Allen, who just always showed extremely raw power and was that mauling type of lineman. He's considered to be really light on his feet, and he's thought of as being someone that is a Pro Bowl potential caliber player. Some people believe that had he played tackle, he could easily be viewed as a top 10 pick in this draft. But as an interior lineman, he's certainly a promising prospect and someone that should excite Commanders fans if we were to elect to draft him. So that's my little spiel on Torrance. I'm going to try to make it quick because I have 4 guys all together. And I realize that you guys all have people you want to speak about as well. The next guy that I would like to talk about is someone that is potentially a day 2 target. And this guy here is probably one of the players that I'm really intrigued by and one of the players that I get quite excited about. So in terms of a guy that we could potentially target on day 2, probably we would have to get him in the 2nd round if he's even available at that point, because he's thought very highly of throughout league circles. It's Steve Avila, played for TCU. He's also an interior lineman. Again, a massive body, 6'4", 334 pounds. He was an All-American for the last 2 years. He could legitimately be a guy that you could think of as being someone that you can lock into your left guard spot from day 1. So, if he's a day 2 pick, you can lock him in at left guard and probably have no concerns about it. He's the type of player, in learning about him for myself personally, he checks off all those boxes as being a Ron Rivera type player. He exhibits all the Ron Rivera attributes. He checks off the experience box. He checks off the versatility box. He has played every position in his college career along the offensive line, with the exception of left tackle. He's played more than 30 games at TCU, so obviously has a lot to bring to the table in terms of experience, as I said. His coach speaks very highly of him from a leadership standpoint. We're all familiar with the success that TCU had this past season, and Steve Avila was thought of as being basically that locker room presence that helped to will that team to having such a successful year. He's considered to be a true pro, someone that you're going to be able to put into your lineup and not have any concerns or worries about being able to acclimate himself to the pro game. Much like O'Cyrus Torrance, he's considered to also be one of those bully type players. We lacked that killer instinct along our offensive line. We lacked that physicality, in my estimation, this past season. We got pushed around a lot, and the guys that I'm going to be talking about tonight are not really guys that get pushed around. Avila checks off that, that box of being able to consistently win at the line of scrimmage. He's really physical. He's always seeking work. He always wants to hit somebody. He's considered to be a good pass protector as well. He anchors really well against power rushers. He's only given up. He actually, in his senior year, I have written down here that he didn't give up any sacks and only gave up 10 hurries and over 500 passing snaps for TCU this past year. One of the concerns with him, if you were to read about some of the knocks on the guy, is lateral movement. If he's forced to be reactionary, he can sometimes have issues. But in those phone booth type situations, he's going to really excel and definitely not get pushed around. So in regards to Avila and Torrance, those are both guys. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but they're both guys that Washington has scheduled private visits with. So that should be something that we give consideration to. The third guy that I'm going to talk about, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to make this quick. Day 3 target out of UCLA, Antonio Mafi. This guy's got a pretty cool story. Again, another mountain of a man, 6'4", 339 pounds, an interior lineman. He has previously played nose tackle for UCLA. He made 24 appearances earlier in his college career with the Bruins at nose tackle. He has appeared in 55 games as a Bruin, tied for most in school history. So that is a sign of the guy's durability. I talked about being able to have guys and bring in guys that we're going to be able to count on and trust. And from a durability standpoint, it sounds like we would really be able to trust this guy based on what he's been able to do in that category to this point in his career. So versatility is something that Ron Rivera players need to exhibit. He's shown the ability to be a quick learner and a quick study, being able to transition from the defensive side of the ball and become an interior offensive lineman. So that should be an encouraging sign and something that's pretty promising about him. This is another guy that is just checks off that nastiness and that, being able to play that bully ball type role. He's not pushed around. He's a really, really huge body. He's considered to be a freight train at the point of attack. So the guy will just look to obliterate people at all opportunities. He's considered to be a really strong and elite run blocker. And with a guy like Brian Robinson, I get the sense that we want to have some guys up front that are just going to be able to match the physicality that he shows as a runner along the offensive line as well. So matching those play styles with our running backs and offensive linemen, that seems to be a common theme. Mafi was another guy that Washington has had a private visit with, or a scheduled private visit. So there may or may not be some interest there. So similar to Steve Avila, one of this guy's concerns is lateral agility. He's not necessarily a swift mover, but again, in one-on-ones, it's going to be pretty hard to beat the guy. Another concern in regards to Mafi is a lack of experience. So he's only got one full season at left guard. He's been playing offensive line for the past bit with the Bruins, but only actually one full season at the left guard position. So this is considered to be one of those raw players, but one of those guys that, can have a high ceiling, having some opportunities to develop on the bench and, take on a depth role early in his career might be a pretty good fit for him. So that could potentially be a day 3 target. The last guy that I want to talk about, and I know I've talked about just interior linemen for the most part here, and some people might be saying, well, what about the tackle position? One of the guys that I was thinking about talking about was Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. He's considered to be a good tackle prospect that might be available when Washington picks. But one of the things that I thought about is Charles Leno is currently sitting on our team. He's set to make just over $9 million this upcoming season. I know he had his struggles this past year, but at the same time, he was a player that, surprised us for the most part and was pretty consistent for Washington in the years prior to 22. I think they're going to give him another chance at left tackle, and they've brought in Wiley. So I don't necessarily think we're going to go with a tackle in the first round. If we do go O-line in the first round, I think it'll be for one of the interior positions. I can see us bringing in potentially someone who is more of the developmental type at the tackle position, someone that can maybe sit for a year and then seamlessly transition after Leno leaves likely after this year. So I thought that DeJuan Jones might be, a potential target in that regard. So similar theme with Jones. He's a guy that Washington has scheduled a private visit with. This is probably the biggest of the linemen that are available in the draft. He's 6'8", he's 374 pounds. Second team All Big Ten for the past 2 years. As we know, Ohio State had one of the top offenses in the country. I believe they were number one this past season, and he was a big part of that. He played right tackle, obviously, for Ohio State, but some people do believe that he has the potential to become a left tackle. And this might be a player that, if we did have thoughts of potentially making him a left tackle at some point, having a season to be able to marinate on the bench and learn the ins and outs of the position might be a decent fit in that regard. So obviously this guy is a giant. He's a mountain of a man. His size gives him a major advantage when working against like speed or power rushers or whatnot. I talked about that reliability and trust factor. The guy has only gave up 4 pressures this past season and no sacks allowed. I mean, he's a big man, but he's fairly athletic as well. He did receive some Division I basketball offers as well, so I think that points a little bit to his athletic ability. Much like all the other guys I talked about, he's just going to manhandle his targets in a run game. He doesn't really get overpowered because of his size in pass protection, but one of the concerns with him is mobility. So his size kind of limits him in terms of what he can do from a mobility standpoint. He doesn't have the best foot speed as well. His 10-yard split in the combine was like in the 4th percentile, so it was quite low. And I know that 10-yard distance or that 10-yard split is what they often pay most attention to with offensive linemen. Basically, he's relying on his hands. He's relying on his size to win battles at this point in his career. So all in all, that wraps up what I wanted to say. But just to go back to circle back to what I talked about at the start, it's going to be all about trust and reliability and finding guys that can provide that offensive line with a much needed level of reliability. And I feel like our prospects that I've featured here check those boxes. Mafi's gives you that reliability from the durability standpoint. Osiris Torrance checks off that trust and reliability box in terms of being a guy that's never given up a sack in his career. Same thing with Steve Avila this past season, clean sheet in terms of sacks. DeJuan Jones, same thing, clean sheet in terms of sacks as a senior. So you know what you're going to get from these guys week in, week out. There has to be, it seems as though there might be an emphasis and an interest for Eric Bieniemy and company offensively to basically not get pushed around anymore on the offensive line. And I think that these 4 guys are 4 guys that are able to provide you with a lot of that physicality that we seem to be lacking up front. And I think that that's exactly what you need in the NFC East to win. And it's exactly what you need to win the old-fashioned way in the NFC East. And I think that any of these guys would be, hopefully welcome additions to our line.
That's a great job, Paul. Can I ask you a quick question? You said at the top that you didn't expect the team to go OL at 1 overall. Is there anybody that you looked at that you would be very excited if we did take at 16?
So the 3 guys that I was doing a little bit of reading about and trying to educate myself about that would probably be guys that maybe you should really, really consider if they're there are Peter Skoronski, Paris Johnson, and the other guy, Broderick Jones from Georgia. But from everything that I read and a lot of the mock drafts that are out there, those guys seem to be long gone before 16. But I think you have to, heavily consider it. If one of those guys is there at 16, maybe you jump on it. I didn't really talk about them because, again, I just don't think they're going to be there. And then the next most highly rated guy after them is that Darnell Wright guy out of Tennessee. And by all sounds of it, it seems like 16 might be a bit too high to pick him there. And I don't necessarily know if you want to use the 16th pick to pick him at that spot when, again, you have Leno for another year. You're paying him $9 million. You just signed Wiley to be your right tackle. So I kind of feel like they ride it out with those two and maybe focus a bit more on the interior.
Well done. I'm not following you.
I was gonna. You want to pause? You want to pause for a 10-second station break, and then we can come back to somebody else? Well, on that one, I guess what I'll say though is good job, Paul. Appreciate that. I guess the next one we can jump on is we'll throw Boone under the bus. He had tight ends. I guess I've seen a tight end mocked a couple times in the first round, so I am curious. John, did you share that sentiment, or are you looking a different direction?
Well, I think the one wild card, and I think Paul kind of mentioned it, alluded to it, is if you listen to Ron Rivera, we've got the greatest tight end room in the league with Armani Rogers, Logan Thomas, Cole Turner, and John Bates, who I sometimes forget is actually a tight end on the team.
You mean LT2?
Yeah. If you listen to Rivera, you think there's no way we're picking a tight end, but I think Eric Bieniemy is the wild card on all the offensive side of the ball because, and hell, who knows? He may have said, Ron, I'll come be your OC, but I want that 16th pick. Who knows what went down? So I think that's the part where you just don't know. But I kind of took Paul's approach because I think we have so many like glaring needs at impact positions. Not that tight end doesn't matter, but a tight end only gets so many balls per game. Rarely is a tight end going to make or break. I mean, there's exceptions, right? There are Kelsey's and the Gronkowski's, but it just seems like we have other priorities that would rise higher than tight end. So I'd be really surprised if we took a tight end in the first two picks. However, one thing that makes this draft kind of a wild card is I think there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks taken. Like, I think we got a little bit of a breakup from that last draft, but that was kind of an outlier. Usually people are overdrafting quarterbacks, and there's some pretty promising ones in this group. So I think guys that we wouldn't expect to be there at 16 could be available. So the top three guys on almost all the draft boards, if you look, and there's some exceptions, but it's usually Dalton Kincaid from Utah, who it gets the most love. He's kind of like, can't block, but he plays like a giant wide receiver. I mean, he's so athletic, and he's kind of the prototypical modern tight end in that he can make crazy catches and is crazy athletic. And he's my favorite because I think he's not much of a blocker though. Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, he's kind of the guy that I would love. He's like my dream tight end because he can do everything. He can block like a maniac, can catch any ball thrown his way. He's just super physical. And then there's Darnell Washington from Georgia, who's kind of the combine god, really hasn't put up big numbers at Georgia, but I think he played behind another tight end, and he's got all that potential. Like, ceiling is unlimited because of his size and his athletic ability. So I don't think any of those three guys would be a pick for us in the first round. If one of them fell to the second round, and I'm not as big a fan of Washington just because of what I just said, is that he's got great measurables, but he hasn't really done it on the field yet. So until I see him do it, the combine gods always scare me a little bit. But I think if any of those three fell to the second round, you'd have to think about it, especially if it was Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer, excuse me. So I'm going to kind of move on to guys that I think we might take later. So I grouped them basically into two groups, a couple in the second and third round, and a couple in the 6th and 7th, and possibly even undrafted range. And that's what I'm going to focus on. So as far as guys that are projected to be third round types, the first guy I'm going to talk about is Tucker Kraft. He's a South Dakota State, so he didn't play at a huge program, but that's his hometown school. He grew up in South Dakota. He's a big guy. He's 6'5", 254 pounds. You can see from the clips, he's a load to bring down. He runs a 4.69 40, so he's not slow. In high school, I thought this was cool. He played 3 positions at every game, and it wasn't tight end. He played running back, middle linebacker, and punter. So he actually played on all 3 units in high school. And he had like 1,400 yards as a running back, 24 touchdowns as a senior. So he's got some talent. He went from 7 catches in his rookie season at South Dakota State to 63 for almost 800 yards in his second year. So it's like once he became a starter, he just exploded. Had some minor injury issues his junior year. And then, but the things I love about him is kind of some of the stuff that Paul alluded to about being a Rivera type player. He's described as being a violent runner, a mauler. He loves contact, really solid blocker, one of the best run blockers in the draft, and is also good in pass pro. At the combine, I thought this was cool. They measure you across all these parameters at the combine, right? He was in the top quartile of almost every single category. Most guys, like, maybe they got a great vertical leap, but they can't do other things. He was in the top 25% of almost every category. So he's just super solid, doesn't really have any glaring weaknesses. He's got a really big catch radius, and he's still a little raw. And I like that about him as well, because that tells you he's only played tight end a couple of seasons, and we may not have seen his best yet. I really like him a lot. The other guy in the 3rd round that I like is Sam Laporta from Iowa. And, Iowa's not known as an offensive juggernaut. So what he did at Iowa is impressive. He played in 43 games, but he's only 22 years old. So he pretty much got out there and started playing right out of the gate. Not as big as Tucker Kraft, but he's 6'3", 245 pounds, ran a 4.59 40. One thing I like about him, he got better every year at Iowa. He's very productive, has really good hands. His last 2 seasons at Iowa, he had 113 catches combined for 1,200 plus yards. And he basically was Iowa's passing attack. If you can imagine a tight end being the star receiver on a team. He broke the record for all-time receptions for tight ends at Iowa. Really good route runner. Really good, able to beat linebackers in the open after the catch, which is not something tight ends can always do. And he's supposed to be one of the smartest players. And I don't know if that's Wonderlic or if they still do the Wonderlic, whatever they do. But he is a very smart young man, which is always a good thing. The blocking is not his number one strength, but I think he could probably pick that up at the pro level if he's as smart as he supposedly is. So those are 2 guys in the 3rd round that I really like. Tucker Kraft, I really like, and the team did meet with Tucker Kraft at the combine, so they seem interested. And then a handful from the 6th and 7th rounds I won't spend a ton of time on, but there's some really good ones. And if I didn't mention it, this is probably one of the strongest drafts for tight ends in like a decade. There are guys in the 6th round that are hard to differentiate from guys that are available in the 2nd and 3rd rounds or projected to be 2nd and 3rd rounders. It's that close to talent level. And you may pick up on that with some of the clips because they all kind of look like the same players. Josh Wiley is a Bearcat from Cincinnati. He also played 46 games. So I tried to focus on guys that had played a lot of college, because we've gotten burned on that, right? With Jamin Davis, a couple other players where they weren't really ready. And most of these guys have played all 3 or 4 or 5 years even. He's a big guy, 6'6", 248, and he probably is a little bit on the lanky side, so he could probably pack on another 10 or 15 pounds at the NFL level. Ran a 4.69 40, that's pretty quick for a 6'6" gentleman. He improved every year he was at Cincinnati. National high jump champion in high school. So you can imagine his vertical leap was 40 inches, I believe. He's really able to get up in the air, which is not surprising given that background. Wins pretty much any contested catch scenario. He comes out on top on that, and he's very tough to bring down. So I like him a lot, especially if he falls all the way down to the 6th round, which is where he's projected. The next guy I want to talk about is Will Mallory. Will Mallory went to Miami, played 58 games. He's 6'4", 239 pounds, ran a 4.54 40. And the thing that I honed in on his highlights and his draft profiles is his red zone ability. He's like a super effective getting open in the red zone and catching the ball in those situations. And that's something we've lacked really quite a bit, especially with the tight end group. I think we had one good season with Logan Thomas where we were able to find him consistently, in the end zone and in the red zone. But other than that, that just hasn't been a really good weapon for us in a long time. So I think he's also athletic enough and has enough speed that he could do return duties. He did some of that in college. Can you imagine a 6'4", 240-pound return man? And he might be able to do that for us. And he's definitely a big play threat because of that speed. I mean, he's a deep threat, even as a tight end. And he's also a very good run blocker. He's got, like Paul honed in on, he's got kind of that nasty attitude. And you see him stiff arming guys pretty frequently in the clip reel here. So I like Will Mallory a lot. And he played for a big time program, right? Miami is a big time national program. And then the last guy I'm going to talk about, he's kind of the flavor of the month. But I still think he's worth talking about. Zach Kuntz. He's my small school. Sometimes you can find these small school gyms like Gary Clark from back in the day, little JMU graduate that nobody knew about until we found him. Zach Kuntz is 6'7" or 6'8", depending on who you believe, 255 pounds, ran a 4.55 40 at the combine, also has a 40-inch vertical leap. And the story with Zach Kuntz is he actually got recruited by Penn State. So he's a top talent. Went to Penn State and basically sat on the bench for 3 seasons. Like just couldn't break into the starting lineup for whatever reason. He finally got fed up and went and transferred to ODU in 2021 and promptly put up 73 catches, 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns in his first season of full-time college football. He had some injury issues in 2022. Not really a blocking guy. Probably part of that is not having played a lot. But as far as being a pass receiving tight end who plays like a wide receiver, he's kind of like, to me, a bigger, badder, stronger, faster version of what we thought Cole Turner might be. And maybe Cole Turner will still turn out to be that. But he's gotten so much hype in the last couple of months. He could, and I especially remember this Virginia game because he ate us alive. But he could be drafted much higher than the 6th or 7th round. I think he could. I've seen people say he could go in the 4th or the 5th. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't know if I would take a risk on a guy like that at that level of the draft. But he's definitely a physical specimen like there aren't many of in the NFL. So if I had to pick my favorites of the group that I talked about, I really hope that with that 3rd round pick, that either Tucker Kraft or Sam Laporta are there, because I think they would immediately be the best tight end on our roster. And I think we need to upgrade. I love Logan Thomas when he's healthy, but I love Jordan Reed when he was healthy. The problem is he's not healthy.
He was never healthy.
So I know Logan Thomas could make us all eat our words from last season if he comes back and looks like he did a couple of years ago, but I just don't know that you can hang your hat on that. But anyway, that's what I got. And again, it depends on what Eric Bieniemy thinks, right? Who knows what he thinks?
A couple of thoughts, John, while you were talking. One, I really like what I'm seeing from Tucker Kraft. I kept thinking he looks like a bigger, slightly more athletic version of Chris Cooley. He's kind of a bully. I like his attitude on the field. He's not going to wow anybody with his speed. He just seems to know how to move in space and make things happen. I got a kick out of him. The other thing I just wanted to mention, yesterday I heard Logan Paulson talking about our tight end room in a similar conversation to what you were just talking about. And he just casually said something that in all the years he's been involved in the NFL, he's never seen a tight end with better hands than Cole Turner. which kind of caught me by surprise. And I forget, who's the afternoon guy on 980, who's young guy who does a really good job. Anyway, he kind of
Big
stopped him
Hoffman?
and said, wait a
Is
minute.
it
What?
Hoffman? Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, is it
yeah.
Hoffman?
Yeah, I like
Hoffman
it.
asked him, wait, say that again. And he just said, like, yeah, just he makes catches in traffic and grabs the ball out of the air like very few tight ends I've ever seen. And then they just kind of moved on to other things. So that's kind of stuck with me. If when you said that Rivera is talking about how confident he is in our tight end room, maybe they're thinking if Cole Turner can get on the field, he is that guy.
Maybe. I mean, one thing we know is that Bieniemy's coming from a program where the tight end was the biggest star on the offense. So I'm sure that didn't escape his notice. So I think we'll have to wait and see. But
I think Kraft is also like what 6'5", 250 something. That's a big old boy.
yep.
All right, well, Mark, you were able to avoid following Paul, so now I guess I'm going to tee things up for you. I think this is a position a lot of people are picking us to take in the first round, and I don't know if it's just because of the value at the position in the first. Maybe you can shed some light on why we would go corner at 16 overall.
Well, I'm gonna start off by doing the podcast version of The Dog Ate My Homework. My real notes are on my work computer, and it got corrupted. So I spent most of this afternoon scrambling to make up paper notes and try to remember everything that I was talking about. But I was gonna, and we could do this for every position group, but with the OL, I kept approaching this in that we're drafting. You'd like to think you're drafting a starter at certainly at 16. But then you're trying to figure, so what are we drafting for as a coach? The team wants to draft a guy they figure can play in their current system and step in and contribute right away and fit exactly what you're trying to do. As a fan of a team that's about to be sold and likely will have all new coaches and schemes and everything else in a year, I'm thinking, well, what do I want to see us do with a draft pick? And I kept coming back to, fortunately, what this team keeps talking about they want guys who are multiple. They want guys who can move, who are versatile and can fill a lot of roles. So maybe that's the perfect. Say again?
Position flex.
Well, yeah, and that's legit when you're in a system or not. I mean, Joe Gibbs used to love the guys on the OL who could slide up and down the line. That makes all the sense in the world. So I agree with Paul. It doesn't look, from all the mocking that I've done, that OL, it would have to be somebody who fell and they were surprised to see still there. I still think that's our number one overall need. But value at 16, I probably keep coming back to cornerback, and I suspect that's probably what they'll do if one of three guys is there. One of which, well, I'll just go with it. The potential unicorn and the consensus top-rated cornerback is Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois. The guy is. He's a 4.39 40. He's athletic as hell. And I fell in love with one, not really a stat that I'm used to seeing. This is fairly new in the way these draft profiles are done, but the QB rating when targeted for cornerbacks. This is a guy who played 4 years at Illinois. In 2019 as a freshman, played in 12 games. And had a solid QB rating when targeted of 76.6. As a sophomore in 2020, played in 7 games and ballooned up to 122.6. Since then, in his last 2 years, he dropped down to the QB rating against of an 86.9. And this last year, and the reason why he's, I guess, the consensus cornerback, number one cornerback, is in 12 games, he played 738 snaps. So, I mean, he was out on the field, 14 pass breakups, 3 picks, and lowered he had an outstanding QB rating when targeted of 24.6, which was number 1 in the nation on PFF. And it's the kind of thing that that obviously gets your attention. He won, was just about every honor you can get. He was a finalist for the Thorpe Award. There are 13 or 14 of these lists that I'm not going to read them. Point being, the guy had a great year. He's got the full package. He can move. He's got ball skills. He looks like he's pretty fluid. The one knock, and I guess this is the reason why he's not projected to go, even as high as in the top 5, as corners seem to be every year, is he's about 180 and 6 feet. He's not considered particularly large, and scouts seem to describe his frame as slight. So I'm a little less concerned to that with a long-term professional. I mean, 1 year in a professional training room at a professional meal table, he's going to put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle. I'm not so worried about that anymore. If that guy's there at 16, you almost have to take him. Seems to me, whether you're Ron Rivera or you're some dude on the internet talking about it like me, it just makes a lot of sense to grab the consensus top rated corner. They're hard to come by. And if he doesn't have to be Deion Sanders, but if you get a guy who can come in and contribute as a freshman, as a rookie, and potentially give you a solid starter material for a few years to come, you almost have to go there. I don't think he's going to drop to 16. I see the Raiders are likely to. I've seen him mocked at 7 with the Raiders a few times. I suspect if he's still hanging around in the low teens, someone's going to jump up to grab him. I hope that's not us. But if he's at 16, that would be my guy. The second guy and the most mocked guy is Joey Porter of Penn State. This is a 4.46 guy who has played in, this is the stat I wanted to mention. Let's see, the man played in 35 games. Started as a freshman. Actually, he only played in 4 games as a freshman. Sorry, you may notice I don't have my notes in very good order here. His QB rating when he was first, as a freshman, when he was first targeted, was 156.3, which I don't think you can get any higher. So basically, if you threw at him, it was a completed pass. Over the last 3 years, he dropped that to 127, down to 84, down to 63. And in his senior year, he jumped up to an elite level. He played in 10 games, 440 snaps, got 24 tackles, 4 assists, did not have any picks, but he broke up 9 passes. The downside on this guy is that a lot of scouts don't seem to think he's got the quick hips and the ability to swivel in traffic. He's better with the action in front of him. He may be a little overly aggressive at times. I kind of like an aggressive cornerback. I think you almost have to be these days. Receivers are bigger and they're aggressive and they get in your face. I don't think you can be a shrinking violet at corner anymore. In the NFC East, you're going to have a guy who's physical. So I would really think if Joey Porter is there, and I think there's a very good chance he will be, I suspect that might be our guy. He is projected mid-first round. He'd be a solid enough pick. I was trying to get you his 40 again. He's a 4.46 40, so not elite speed.
How big is he, Mark? How big is
this man is 6'2" and about 195 now. Thank you. I was going to mention one thing I noticed looking at corners this year. This is a big cornerback crop. There are a lot of big, talented, aggressive run-stopping corners that are going to be available in the first round and the second round, and maybe even a little deeper. If we don't take one in the first round, I can almost guarantee we'll be taking one in the second round. And I've got a couple of guys I'm going to mention about that in a minute. But I have a funny feeling that you might be looking at our number 1 overall pick right here in Joey Porter, and you could do a lot worse. I think this is a guy who won't start right away, but I think by the end of a rookie season, could be seeing plenty of time in nickel action and I think he's got a high upside. He seems to be a football player. That's the note that I made for myself. He looks like a football player to me.
Well, he grew up in football locker rooms, didn't he?
He did. His dad was Joey Porter, a linebacker who bounced around the NFL for several years. So he's a legacy, right? He's not going to be afraid of the environment, and he's not going to be unable to handle himself in an NFL locker room or on a field. The other guy who gets mentioned as a first rounder, who's a potential, is Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. This is another fairly large cornerback. He's 6'1", just about 200 now, which is interesting to me because cornerbacks, most years, it seems to me when I'm looking at cornerbacks, you're getting guys who are, 5'11" and 180. A lot of the guys I'm looking at this year that are coming out are 6 foot plus and already pushing 200 pounds before hitting an NFL training table. And I automatically add 10 pounds to these guys. So this is another good sized player. He's a 4.3 840. He's a 41.5 vertical. He played in, I keep losing it, you guys. I apologize. Well, let's just skip over that then. So the downside is lack of experience. He's only played 2 years, freshman and sophomore years. He saw action in 6 games as a freshman, and even then was that solid rating against of 85.3. As a sophomore, he played in 12 games. He had just 4 pass breakups and a QB rating of 90. I'm curious why he's getting rated as a first round type player. I honestly don't quite see it. He's got speed, and I mean, the guy can run, and he's got good size. But I needed to mention him because there's a good chance he'll be if he drops to the second round, I suspect that would be a pretty good value pick. But those are the 3 guys that I see consistently associated with Washington. So this might be another guy. I don't think his upside, actually, we have no idea what it is. He's barely played, and I'm always concerned, like John is, with a lack of experience. So for second round picks, if for some reason we don't go corner, there are 2 guys in the second that I wanted to mention. One, I did not get a YouTube for, Derek, so don't worry about it. That's Deonte Banks out of Maryland.
Maryland, yeah. I was wondering if he was going to get a nod.
He let me see. Let me tell you about Deonte Banks. Deonte Banks is another 6-footer. He is 197. He played all 4 years at Maryland, played in 11 games as a freshman. Is another guy who consistently he got a lot better in his last 3 years, consistently in the high 60s and low 70s in the pass rating against. Not a big interception guy, but what he is and what he jumps out at the YouTubes I did look at him, he's a very aggressive, almost cocky player who he scares me a little bit. I think he's got all the talent in the world. I watched Maryland play, I think 3 times this year, and he didn't really jump out at the screen at me as a corner. He kind of jumped out more at me as a downhill guy, charging into the backfield and making tackles on the edge. The one that I am intrigued by as a second rounder, my second day pick, is DJ Turner out of Michigan. So I don't know if you guys were heavy into and I do have a YouTube on DJ. The reason I'm mentioning him is I think he's a solid second round pick. He's a smaller guy. By this year's standards, he's 5'11", 180 now. But he's a 4.26 40. And he ran the second best cone drill since they've been timing that, according to what I was reading. And just watching him play, so I think he projects more as a slot corner than an edge corner, if nothing else, based on his size. But when you watch him on the field, he just is a natural flow to the ball guy with great quick reactions. Does not seem to shy away from contact with larger receivers, keeps the play in front of him. I watched 2 or 3 different vids of the guy, and I'm imagining him also as a potential punt returner. I don't know. I didn't see that written a lot about him, but with the guy with that kind of quicks, and I don't think he's a whole lot smaller than Daryl Green was. I don't rule out 5'11" guys as being starters. I really kind of am intrigued by this guy, and that would be an exciting pick to me. I think that's the kind of guy that would find himself on the field a lot as a rookie in different packages based on his speed and in nickel situations. And if he develops as a slot and maybe even as an edge corner in a year or two, you get that guy in the second or even third round. I don't think he'll last to the third round. I think he's gone in the second. That would be a really solid second round pick. Keep your eyes on DJ Turner. Speed covers a lot of ills, and a creative defensive coordinator can find a way to get him in situations where he can make plays. So that would be an exciting pickup for me. I only have one guy for third days. I was going to try to do more on him, but I really kind of like Riley Moss out of Iowa, who is a 6'1", almost 200 pound, sound familiar, cornerback who played in 49 games in his 5 years at Iowa. He played over 2,500 snaps. This is a guy who has been on the field a lot, has a lot of experience in big time college football. He's, to me, seems like just such a classic rotational guy. I suspect you could put him at safety. You could put him at corner. He's not going to blow you away with his athleticism, but he strikes me as a guy who knows where he's supposed to be on the field. And it may be an accident, but the first time I discovered him was following a link from a Pittsburgh Steelers fan of mine who was talking about a guy that Steelers fans are targeting as a late round steal. And it may just be because Iowa's uniform looks like the Steelers, and because they're not all the brightest fans. Most of my
Well, if that's the case, we would draft everybody out of Minnesota.
There you go. Yeah.
He's picked more passes off in this highlight reel than our defensive backfield has in a couple of years. I say that much.
I like guys who. I can't remember the linebacker that I had picked out last year before we discovered that Washington football teams don't actually draft linebackers, but he's just a football player, and that used to be valued more than it is now. I think we go on measurables a lot. I still go because maybe I'm old, like old school, but when I see a football player on the field, they just kind of jump out at me. They're in the right place. They're making plays. This guy, to me, is the epitome of that. He's also a pretty good sized dude. And he runs a 4.45 40. He's not unathletic, and he's got good size. And with all that experience, I think that would be another solid pickup. So I plan to put on the thread a link to the diamonds in the rough thing. I mean, we could go on all night about all the positions. There's a lot of talented corners. We are going to come away with a talented corner, maybe two, whether it's first round, second round. Your guess is as good as mine. So that's where I am on corners. Don't ask me any questions because I don't have my notes.
Good job.
I like it. So I guess to the point is, so Mark,
Yeah.
you would endorse us taking a corner at 16, because there has been, myself included, has pushed back a lot. Like, why would we do that? You've got St. Juice, Fuller's under contract, making decent money. Obviously we moved on from McCain, but you got Curl, you got Forrest as your DBs. Is 16 worth a cornerback?
My answer to that would be, I guess, two things. One, do we have Benjamin St. Just?
Yeah.
I'll believe it when I see it. And two, we have at safety. I would not endorse drafting a safety. I would endorse drafting a legit corner who can play some man and can be solid in zone as well. Two guys. I would endorse it if it's one of two guys. I would endorse it fairly strongly if it was Witherspoon. I would sign off and be okay with it if it was Porter. Beyond that, no.
On St. Jude's, you're referring to the concussion history.
The
He's already got
concussion history and just an overall inability to stay on the field. He's been tweaked and beat up, and I love what I see from the guy, but it's not a guy that I'm penciling in and hoping to get 16 games, 17 games out of.
Fair. All right, Bob, you're muted, so you might want to unmute before you make a.
Yeah, sorry. I was busy coughing a minute ago while Mark was trying to talk, so I thought I'd be polite and then forgot I
Took your
was
breath
polite.
away, did he? He's
'Cause
got
I'm
the
never
ability to
polite.
do that.
Costume change.
No, I swallowed my beer wrong. That always sucks. But
I didn't even know
Doesn't
that
happen.
was possible.
doesn't happen very often, John. It really doesn't. I understand the concept that value in the first round is at cornerback at the moment, but man, I'll tell you what, it really chaffed me to sink another first round draft pick into a defense that already has 5 that we put into it. Right? I mean, it just, especially when you look at how bare the cupboard is on the offensive side of the ball on the line when it comes to first round draft talent, it would just hurt. I mean, I get it, Mark. I get it. And thank you. I think that was great. I'm intrigued by a couple of those guys, especially the Darryl Green size guy. I love the romantic in me would love to have another guy that size on the team that can just outrun the world. But anyway,
So I guess, Bob, the quick answer to that then is I agree with you that if we were drafting in the top 10, I would say an OL would be a complete no-brainer. The question is, do you get first round value at 16 on the offensive line this year?
Yeah.
And the all too often argument, we'll just trade back if your guy's not there. Well, it takes 2 to tango. So, you don't want to overdraft O-line. You don't want to overdraft corner. You don't want to overdraft it anywhere. And if you can't trade back, you've got to get the best player. We cannot continue to draft players that don't work out. And the only way that you can do that is to take the best damn player on the board.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think the depth at cornerback talent and whether or not we see that as a need may very well dictate whether we can or whether we will trade out a 16. If Porter is there and somebody's willing to give up the world to get their hands on him, I'd rather have the world than Porter.
And to be fair, we were signing Rashad Wild Goose off the street last year to cover people, and he was doing it effectively, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about. All right. Well,
True.
I guess Bob, do you want to tee this thing up? I got your first highlight package ready to roll.
Yeah,
on the linebackers.
Yeah, so I willfully chose the short straw. I picked up Mark's. Gosh, I don't even know what to call
my tilting at windmills.
Yeah, and so I took my turn at tilting at windmills this year because, as Mark said a minute ago, linebacker doesn't seem to be a position that we draft. It also doesn't seem to be a position that we particularly value, and a lot of that probably has to do with the way we play. But I think nearly every fan out there would tell you that linebacker, either right behind offensive line or maybe even shoulder to shoulder with offensive line, is our weakest position group. And I went and I looked. The problem is, unlike cornerback, which is stupidly deep, as Mark just proved, linebacker is not incredibly deep in this draft, especially if you're looking for guys to play in the middle. And playing a 4-2-5 the way we do a lot of times, you're really kind of looking at 2 middle linebackers instead of an outside guy. The best of the linebacking group this year tend to be edge players, and I don't see us spending a lot of draft capital in terms of edge players on the defensive side. So the first guy that I looked at and kind of grabbed my attention, he's a very interesting prospect. The first thing that grabbed my attention, this is Jack Campbell out of Iowa. The first thing that grabbed my attention is the fact that he's an academic All-American. And
that's the first thing that grabbed your the fact that he's 9 feet tall and 280 pounds.
No. He's only 6'5", 249. But my first thought was, we're getting into Ted Hendricks space here, and I'm okay with that.
He
I
looks like a
remember-
big white corn-fed guy to me, man.
Well, and he plays for Iowa. So what do you know? I mean, he's a native Iowan. So there you go. He's also the Jack Butkus Award winner this year, and this tells you exactly how not deep the linebacking draft is. The Butkus Award winner for the year is projected to go anywhere from very late first round to mid-late third round. I have seen him mocked all over the place, and every single report says roughly the same thing. His measurables are relatively middle of the road as far as linebackers are concerned, other than the fact that he's 6'5" and 249. 4'6", 40. He didn't do the bench at the combine. I was kind of interested in that. He didn't do it, but the guy's got 2 solid years as a starter with Iowa. He's been a linebacker his entire career at Iowa. He could have been a basketball player. He led his high school team to 2 straight high school championships in the state of Iowa and was heavily recruited to play basketball at a number of big schools. But he's got a real nose for the ball. He is always in and around the action. He is a thinking man's linebacker. He is also apparently a really good communicator on the field, constantly talking to his teammates, constantly moving guys around. At Iowa, his nickname was Captain Jack, and he's the guy that is all about making sure guys are in the right place, guys are talking, guys are doing the right thing. You see that big wingspan right there. He's pretty decent in pass pro. He's not going to be the guy that goes after the quarterback a lot, even though you're seeing that here. In most of the clips that I watched, he's playing back off the ball, and he's hunting, seeking, and finding in many instances. I think he'd be a great compliment to Jamin Davis. Is one of the reasons that I love this guy. And I could see him, if he's on the board with that second round pick, or if we were to drop way back in the first round because, somebody just offered us stupid amounts to move up. He might be a guy that we look at there, but I'm thinking that 47th pick, I don't think he's going to last to the end of the third round, but I wanted to throw up a name that I thought, was a possibility, at least early day 2, maybe late day 1. And he's kind of that guy. And I just,
Hey, Bob, before you go on, I just want to mention my favorite play in this highlight reel is when he sacks the player in the end zone, and then that's not enough for him for the safety. He drags him through the end zone. I just love that.
Notice that, did you? Yeah, he gets up and he like walks in like he's dragging a sack of potatoes.
And I like that they showed that like 5 times from 5 different angles.
Yeah. And again, it feels like he's got a little bit of a nasty streak, but he's not a showboat for the most part. It's, you don't see a lot of the, hey, look at me. It's, he's that, as Mark said, he's that corn-fed guy for, maybe it was John. He's that corn-fed guy he's a lunchbox guy. And I just love that about him. And he always seems to be
football player, right? Football player.
Yeah, he's a football player. The second guy I've got, and I didn't give you a highlight on this guy because I don't know that he's a real possibility, but Washington did meet with him. All of these guys are on the meet list in some way, shape, or form. It may be very informal, but they have had in-person discussions with all 4 of the guys that I picked out. That was a total accident, by the way. I didn't check that list until after I had my list. But Dan Henley out of Washington State. And we're probably looking at a third round pick for him if he lasts to the end of the third round. Maybe he's 6'1", 225, ran a 4.54. He played 1 year at Washington State after 3 years at North Carolina. He's a converted wide receiver. He was recruited as a wide receiver in North Carolina, didn't cut it his first 2 years, and they moved him to linebacker. Made the switch as a junior in 2020. He's better rushing the passer than he is as a pass defender. In fact, he kind of looks like he might be a little bit of a liability in pass defense. But he's sneaky quick. He kind of, I don't know, watching him rush the passer reminded me a little bit of a snake. He just kind of slithers around guys. He's an athlete. I don't know if he's a football player, but he is definitely an athlete, and he's probably got the frame to put on a little bit more weight. But I don't know whether they do that or not, because he feels to me a little bit like Jamin Davis. He didn't go to one of the big schools, and he played really well last year, but Jamin Davis played really well at Kentucky, but there was a dearth of experience. And it feels like after only 2 years on defense, maybe Henley's kind of in that same mold, and it scares me a little bit. The third guy is one that I found doing some of the mock drafts for our thread earlier this year, Derek. DeMarvion Overshawn. I've been looking
Very
at
popular
him
name.
Yeah, I've been looking at him for 2 or 3 months now.
I like that kid. I like him.
Out of Texas. He was recruited out of high school as a safety, played 2 years for Texas as a safety before they moved him to the linebacker position. If there's a real knock against this kid, it's upper body strength. He only did like 8 or 9 reps at the combine. There's a lot of room for improvement. A couple of you guys, like Mark was talking about, you get him with a professional training staff at a professional table, where
With
he's
a
getting
dietitian.
all the right, exactly, all the right meals. And this kid could put on 10 pounds in a hurry and be an amazing addition to the defense. The thing that really kind of floors me is he's great both directions. He's great downhill rushing the passer. Texas used him extensively in blitz packages where he would come on a delayed blitz. Granted, you're looking at YouTube highlights, but the guy never fails to bury the quarterback. He's got great adjustment to whatever the quarterback's doing. He wraps up and he drops the guy. If he can get a hand on him, he stays with it, and it's amazing to watch. The other thing is he's great in coverage. As an ex-safety, he may be one of the best coverage linebackers I've seen coming out of college in a little while. He's always in the right place. He's got enough speed to make up the distance when he gets beat in most cases, and he's got some length, right? He's 6'3", 229. Again, we're talking about an athlete here. He is just a great athlete, but he's got some solid football instincts and looks like he plays the game the right way to me watching the highlights. I feel like he's also one of only 3 linebackers on Washington's top 30 visit list. So they brought him to Ashburn to sit him down and talk to him, as well as having formal discussions at the combine and informal discussions at the Senior Bowl. So he's had multiple meetings with the team, and he's being projected kind of in that space. I feel like we might really legitimately be looking at a linebacker, and that's in that 3, 4, 5 round range, right in the middle of the draft. Feels like he will probably survive to the 4th round, maybe even the 5th round, depending upon how things fall. But I wouldn't be unhappy if they pick this kid up with our compensatory pick at the end of the 3rd.
Bob, when you were watching it, we let go of McCain, right?
Yep.
Did it not jump off the page at you that this guy could be that 3rd safety box?
Yeah.
Tight end covering, running back in the flat guy.
Yeah, his skill set is such that he could almost redefine that Buffalo nickel position as a legit hybrid. I mean, with his size, he's a legitimate linebacker down in the box. But he's got the coverage skills and the speed to play safety still in the NFL. Yeah, absolutely. And there was a moment, there've been more than 1 or 2 moments I've watching him. I've thought, yeah, I wonder if they're targeting him, and that's part of the reason they felt comfortable letting go of McCain, is because they think they can get him, or maybe they're thinking about taking him a little higher than, of course, this is crazy time of the year. I'm convinced that NFL teams burn top 30 visits just to throw other people off or burn top 30 visits to set up potential trade value later. I mean, we get into the 4th round and somebody that really wants this guy is looking at Washington and going, they had him in for a visit and they're picking three slots above us. Let me throw 3 draft picks at him and see if I can get him to move 3 places. Right. I don't know. But anyway, that's my 3rd guy. And then my 4th guy's just kind of came out of nowhere on me, and I'm going to mess his name up. I think it's Savosia Dennis, and he plays out of Pittsburgh. He's 6 feet even, 226, did a 4.64. He's projected late in the draft, 6th round, maybe even 7th round. This guy is definitely a box linebacker. He is not a coverage linebacker at this point in time. In fact, he's probably a liability in coverage, but he's got a pretty good nose for the football. He also has a solid blitz instinct. As you can see watching these packages, he's definitely a downhill kind of guy. And seriously, I see him as very possibly a special team star if they were to pick this guy up. I mean, I still remember when linebackers made up the core of your special teams group. Doesn't seem to be that way with Washington anymore, and oftentimes not even a lot of teams. But this guy's got kind of that nasty special team streak. He sees the entirety of the field. That's one of the big things that people are touting as a strength, is that while he doesn't have the instant reaction that some other guys do, he's a little cerebral and he sees everything that's going on around him. And playing special teams might very well be one of those places he makes his mark, but he could totally be like a first, second down guy on the defense. But there you go. 4 names to watch.
Is that a C on his chest?
Yeah.
Defensive captain at Pitt?
Yep, I believe so.
So, Bob, I just wanted to mention one thing because I was sitting here thinking, okay, one of the guys you mentioned, I think it was Campbell, reminded me of like a bigger, stronger, faster, more aggressive Cole Holcomb. And so I was thinking, as you were talking about, we lost Cole Holcomb, whether you loved Cole Holcomb or not. And they brought in Cody Barton, who's supposed to be the next big thing, right? Like,
right.
And maybe he will be. I hope he will be. But if he turns out to just be a guy, or just to be basically a replacement for Holcomb, who was a notch down from what we really needed, I feel like, then we could still be in trouble, even if we don't use linebackers a lot in our scheme. The cupboard is still pretty bare. So I don't know.
No, you're not wrong, and that's part of the reason I think that I really like Jack Campbell. He looks like a bigger, stronger, faster version of Holcomb, just like you said, and maybe a little more cerebral. And Holcomb was he was the signal caller, before he went out this last year. And I could totally see Campbell, maybe not as a rookie, but certainly down the road, being that guy. He's got the communication skills, according to everything I read. He inspires a tremendous amount of respect amongst his teammates, never takes a play off, and he understands the game at a very basic level, that a lot of the athletes who just rely on their special physical tools don't necessarily have.
Funny, Bob, while you were doing the linebackers, I was thinking in terms of what I was saying about corners and all the other positions in a transitional situation like we may be, where you're bringing in guys for 1 year. What seems to make sense for this year and this coaching staff are guys like Overshawn, and I mean, we've been doing that for years, right? In our 4-2-5, you want guys like Kaliki Hudson out there, and you want guys like Overshawn who've got the wheels and the range to maybe do Buffalo nickel type work and fill in against the run and maybe cover some out of the backfield. If I'm looking long term for who's a versatile guy you'd like to have on your team, maybe a year or two from now, if Jack Del Rio is no longer here and we're going back to a more traditional 4-3, Campbell's intriguing as hell to me as a second day pick.
Yep.
Because that looks like a guy who could play in a lot of systems, he might have middle linebacker written all over him. And so I'm a little torn. I would not be unhappy at all to see him in the second or third round, depending on what we do, obviously in the first, but that would be a solid pick. And then in terms of what we do for this team, some of those smaller, quicker guys, I mean, we'll be taking somebody. I'm looking at our linebacker room. They're going to be drafting somebody. My guess it's going to be more the smaller guys than a big guy like Campbell, though.
Yeah. So I looked at all three of the guys. Washington has only had top 30 visits with 3 linebackers. Both 2 of them are middle round guys, Overshawn and who was, hang on, I got the list here somewhere. List of Washington's. No, that's our draft picks. Let's drop there's where I put it. Overshawn and a kid named something Williams. Who is it? Out of Dorian Williams out of Tulane. And I've actually seen him mocked to Washington in the 4th round a couple of places. Both Williams and Overshorn are like middle of the draft guys. And then the third guy, Kyle Sowell out of Arizona State, is currently considered in every list I can find him in, an undrafted free agent.
I'm
And he's
pretty
on the
sure
top
that's
30
Penny.
list.
I'm pretty sure that's Penny Sewell's little family member too. The
So,
tackle.
you know, what that tells me is I don't know. I don't believe we're looking at a linebacker above the 3rd round at best. That's what this list tells me. But it may also be what Washington wants this list to say to people.
Yeah.
Because we're smart that way.
Yeah.
Well, we just have to remember last year where we didn't even mention Jahan Dotson, nor did any of the other experts out there, and there was never a doubt about that they were going to take Jahan Dotson. So we just don't know, man. No way of knowing.
True.
And
Well,
I think they were right to do what they did. Dotson certainly is justifying what they did.
Looks like a pretty good pick so far.
just a year later, or yeah. Sorry, my brain went sideways.
All right, Derek.
All right, well, I'm gonna zag when everybody else is zigging. So I'm gonna put out a theory here because I'm gonna justify the research I put into the edge position. So we've paid John Allen, right? We've paid Deron Payne. What is a good way to maintain your payroll while not completely crippling yourself along the D line when you pay both of your interior D linemen top 10 contracts? And I do wonder if they're not going to target an edge rusher early to avoid the need to pay Sweat and Young. They've not picked up Young's 5th-year option yet. To this point, we have heard 0 progress on a contract extension with Sweat. So I'm curious to see if maybe they go into this draft with the idea of drafting an edge rusher early, day 1 or day 2, who you have control of through the extent of both Allen and Payne's contracts while you're paying them on a rookie deal, and then we move one of those 2 guys, or possibly both of those 2 guys, which would be crazy out of the box thinking. So trust me, I have no confidence that that's coming from this front office, but we can play this game, for lack of a better term, and have some fun. So I picked a couple guys. I'm not going to waste your time with the guys that are the tops in the draft. Like Will Armstrong, because he's might be the number 1 prospect in this draft. It wouldn't be worth even talking about. But a name that continues to pop off the page at me, that is continuing to be slept on, is the defensive end out of Notre Dame, Isaiah Foskey. This guy, as I roll this and mute it, whoops. For some reason, I'm seeing him ranked from the 10th defensive end. I'm not talking about 10th overall player in the draft, 10th D end, all the way up to ranked into the 3rd and 4th round. I don't think he goes that far because he is just a hell of a football player. I don't know that I want to take him at 16, but I would be curious if we could either draft someone at 16 and then trade back up into the second half late, the same, similar to that Montez Sweat template, or just flat out trade back and take a guy so that you have your edge rusher, your premier defensive player under contract for 5 seasons and control on a rookie deal. So 2023 Senior Bowl participant. Sorry, he's actually rewinding. That's not freezing. 2022 Consensus All-American, 2022 Walter Camp All-American First Team, 2022 AFCA All-American First Team, 2022 Action Network All-American Second Team, on and on and on. 2022 CBS Sports All-American. So the kid is for real. He's a multi-year starter at Notre Dame, played in 4 seasons. Over the last 2 seasons, he has had 11 sacks in each season. So he's doing it on a national level, on a legit program. He measures off the chart in a lot of things. Now his 40-yard dash isn't insane. It's a 4.58, but even a 4.58, we were talking about tight ends being elite, and this guy's a defensive end. Broad jump is 125 inches, so that's in the top 90 plus percentile. He's explosive. He's extreme off the edge, and not only that, you'll see a lot of the times in this package, he actually drops into coverage, which is something that Rivera and Del Rio seem to do with their defensive ends. So can he be a fit? Additionally, as a playmaker, and if I'm not mistaken, he actually blocked 2 punts in the same game.
Wow.
So he's a special teams kind of nightmare. He's fast. He's quick. He's got good bend around the edges. He's a little undersized at 6'5" and 264. But then again, that's not really undersized when you consider that there are edge rushers that are 20 to 30 pounds lower, smaller than him and 2 to 3 inches shorter. So he's got
Manley sized.
Well, I mean, that was 30 years ago there, Bob. He's got the strength to take on the blockers, especially at the premium positions. You'll see he does play both sides of the line of scrimmage. There are also times that he will line up in the middle. He'll line up with his hand in the dirt, and he will line up standing up almost like an inside linebacker position. So I'm not comping him to this guy, but in saying he's going to be on the same level, but kind of that Micah Parsons player that you can move him around and you can set him in multiple fronts. Can he check off a lot of boxes that eases the long-term decisions of our defensive staff as well as our front office, and do it at a much lower cost? Like I said, I don't know that I'm spending 16 on him. I don't even know that I would, like I said, would spend a first round pick, maybe just to get that 5th year. But I think if he's there in the second, or if he's falling into the second, it could be an interesting conversation to have. With the questions around Chase Young and his ability to actually be a game breaker, his ability to be what we hoped he would be, and the questions around Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat's going to demand a big deal. He's probably looking for a paying contract, and I don't know that you can pay 3 defensive linemen $20+ million and build a roster. It's tough to do, especially with Sam Howell as your quarterback. And I say that because he's not a rookie first-round pick where you have 5 years of control. We've already lost 1 year of control. He's got 2 more. So the questions are going to have to start being asked, especially if this coaching staff plans on being here in the long term. I would love to see this guy in our uniform because it would open up some options. As a playmaker, he's nasty. He's not the biggest hitter in the world, but like you guys have mentioned, he's a football player. He's taking on a tackle and a guard, and he's taking down a running back at the line of scrimmage. He flows to the ball very well. He sheds blocking very well. He's not going to bull rush. Every single highlight I've seen him in, he is not getting up and under a tight end and lifting them, or a tackle and lifting them off the ground. But he has such instinctive burst off the ball. He's usually around them before they have a chance. So can he develop some additional pass rushing moves, add 5 to 7 more pounds and some NFL muscle? You can change some things like that. My next guy that I'm looking at, a little less known only because he shares the name of somebody that went to Alabama, and that's Byron Young out of Tennessee. A little bit smaller guy. Right now I'm seeing him mocked anywhere from the 3rd round to the 5th round. I think he's worth a 3rd round look, at least a 3rd round look, especially being a compensatory pick. This guy is long, and he's a physical freak. Now he's 6'2", 250. But he ran a 4.43 40. Now, 40 times don't really mean anything when it comes to a defensive end. So I looked a little bit more into the analytics. He ran a 1.62 10-yard, which is in the 71st percentile. His vertical was 38 inches, which is 93rd percentile, which is explosion and burst off the line. And his broad jump was 132, which is 100th percentile. So he runs the fast. He ran in the 100th percentile in speed and explosion. So the biggest knocks on him, if I'm remembering correctly, and now like Mark, I've kind of got to pull up my notes here. He doesn't have the length. So when you look at him, he doesn't have the, the Montez Sweat arms where he looks like he can scratch his knee without bending over. He doesn't have that extreme push off, but he absolutely can compensate with his speed and his acceleration around the edge. Knox is that he often plays a little bit too high, and the blocker in more seasoned blockers are capable of getting under his pads and getting leverage. But if you'll watch, he's never truly out of a play. He will lose leverage and he will recover. His left tackle will get him, stand him up, and push him backwards, and then he'll end up running the running back down from behind. He's just got that physical freak ability. At 6'2", 250, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's definitely got some room to growth, and I see him maybe falling into the fourth. So if you've added some of those more premier positions on day 1 and day 2, if you can find this guy in the 4th round, I think he can be absolutely a rotational piece, and he can come into becoming a starter down the road. Once he can get some additional moves, he stunts well. He's able to play the backside very well. He hits gaps hard. When he hits a gap, he is going 100 miles an hour, to the point where on that highlight right there, the guard couldn't even get around him, even though he saw him coming. As you can see, he's very good in pursuit. He's disciplined. He contains the edge. And well, I don't know. He jumped off the page at me about how he was just kind of always in the right place at the right time, and he never truly got beat. He didn't get pancaked. Obviously, I'm watching highlights, so you're not going to see that. But he seems like he's always in the play. The last guy I'm going to talk about is kind of a later round pick. Another physical freak. You'll see that it's kind of a common trend, who not a lot of people are talking about, but he really brings the versatility that Rivera and the team seem to covet, is Yaya Diaby. Plus he has the coolest name in the world. Yaya Diaby runs a 4.5 140, multi-year starter at Louisville. Played in 1,126 snaps, which is the least of the guys that I'm talking about. So he is not as seasoned, but he has played multiple. Like I said, he's played multiple positions along the front. Measurables wise, he measured off the charts, not only in 40, but in vertical 10-yard broad jump and wingspan. He was in top 70th percentile in all of those things. So he's kind of one of those physical guys that you wonder if he's going to be able to truly refine the technique of his game. He's been mocked a lot later. I've seen him mocked as high as the 3rd again, but I've seen him also mocked as late as the 6th, ranked as the 180, 190th player in the draft, and not even in the top 20 of his position. So he could be an intriguing prospect that we could find day 3 if he were to trickle down into the 5th or 6th round. Taking a flyer on a guy like this who shows the bend, he shows the ability to beat the tackles, and he shows the ability to play multiple fronts along the defensive line, to see if he can actually, turn something on and turn into a viable long-term contributor. I don't know if I would say a long-term starter. Obviously, if you take Diaby, you're not going to let Sweat and Young walk. The other two would put more of an emphasis on that. His biggest knock is that his physicality sometimes takes over and he runs himself out of the play. He's too aggressive to the point where he gets out of control and he works himself away from the action. But then they also give him the benefit of the doubt to say that he's always involved in a play. So He might run himself out of it, but he's got the physical ability to recover and get back in it. I think at his true size, he measures 6'3", 263. I could see him being a kind of a James Smith-Williams type. At 6'3", he could get up to 275. He could play multiple positions along the line and be a key contributor later. But that would be a flyer guy. I don't think you're looking at him to start day one. I don't even think you're looking at him to truly contribute day one. He would be more of a guy that you would get to develop and to find a way into the starting rotation after, Chase Young and Montez Sweat were to move on.
Well, the point about cap management going forward is well taken. And personally, if you're getting value at the pick, I will never have a problem with taking a pursuit DE sized / linebacker sized guy who can disrupt on defense. I don't think you can have enough of those guys. You've got one, it changes everything. A guy who can pursue and disrupt from the edge like that.
Well, that's why Foskey did intrigue me. And I mean, we would be talking if we were to take Foskey in the first round, and obviously I would be interested. I don't know that I could even endorse it. If we were to take him in the first round, we're talking about 6 defensive players in the last 7 drafts in the first round.
Yeah, I didn't see him as a first, and it didn't sound like you did either. If as a second round player like that, I wouldn't hesitate a beat on taking a guy you thought could disrupt off the edge like that and help you cap wise.
Watching Foskey's tape there, Derek, the name that kept running through my head was Thibodeau. And watching New York play last year and watching Thibodeau have his coming out party, especially against Washington, just made me want that kind of a guy. And we don't have that kind of a guy. I mean,
Right.
I think we thought we were getting him with Montez Sweat. So far, it hasn't happened. I think we thought we were getting him with Chase Young. Jury is obviously still out.
It's way out. Not just out.
But
I think that might be a bust. I really do.
I don't know that he'll be a bust, John, but I don't know that he'll ever be worth the second pick. I think I don't, the more I watch Chase Young, granted, it's a small sample size when he's truly healthy. This September will tell. But every time I watch Chase Young these days, what I'm thinking is I probably wouldn't be unhappy if we drafted him 24th. But we drafted him second. I don't know.
So what's interesting to me, and let's not to wrap up on that, but think about the team that is going to be taking the field this fall. This is a team with I'm not surprised we haven't talked about wide receivers this year because that's the strongest room on our team. Arguably one of the top wide receiver rooms in the league. We didn't talk about running backs, which we probably could have some. We also didn't talk about quarterbacks on a team that has a projected likely starter who has 1 start under his belt and a career journeyman as backup and competition. And we're not batting an eye about quarterbacks. That anybody else find that interesting coming into this thing?
I'm hopeful that we don't. This is going to sound really weird, but I've said it and I still stand by it. I don't want this coaching staff doing anything in that position that's going to dictate that what the next coaching staff can do. If you take a quarterback in the first round, you're dictating what the next coaching staff can do at the quarterback position.
Well, what they have to do year one anyway.
And it goes beyond that, I think, Derek, because if you're going to pick a quarterback in the draft, you almost have to pick him in the first round to have any reasonable chance. And I know, yes, I know Tom Brady, or we're going to try it out, the 2 examples in NFL history, but the stats show that the quarterbacks that make it that are drafted, it's in the early rounds, like high early rounds. So unless we're going to make a big, bold move and go after somebody that we love with everything we got, I'm so tired of grabbing guys that are like developmental or we'll need a year or 2. We already got that. We already know we have probably better than that on the roster already. So that's the reason I don't. I mean, I would be okay if they said, you know what, CJ Stroud is going to be the next great, quarterback, and we gave up 2 first rounders and a second rounder to move up to get him. I'd be fine with that if that's if you're going to make a bold move. But I don't want to throw a 3rd rounder or a 5th rounder or a 6th rounder at a quarterback just to say we did. One other thing I wanted to mention: how long has it been since we drafted a kicker? Because I think we need a kicker.
Do
So
you
I think
draft a kicker, or do you keep shopping the waiver wire until you finally hit? I wonder what the stats are around the NFL. How many teams have a Pro Bowl kicker who's been there that they actually drafted? I don't know.
But we got an extra 6th rounder, and I mean, the thing about drafting kickers is you can probably get the best college kicker in the draft in a late round, right? I mean,
just by drafting them.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there, as that could be a surprise move.
I feel, Mark, I feel like every time I find a kicker in the NFL that I like, it turns out he's been on like 4 teams and has been cut repeatedly until he every kicker Washington's had for the last 10 years is out there blowing it up someplace right now.
Well, some of them are. There's been like 60 of them in the last.
Well,
years.
that's true, but I mean,
they tend to be streaky. I think that the nature of the position is they'll lose their confidence for a while, and then they'll work their way back. But it's been a long time since we had. I mean, when is the last great kicker we had? Like Chip Lowmiller, Mark Mosley? I don't know. It's a really important position. That's the only thing I think you can make a case for it.
It is.
Well, and Joey Slye didn't exactly end the season with high confidence levels either. So I wouldn't be surprised to see us take one late. I would be very surprised to see us take one on day 1 or day 2.
Yeah. No. Well, I think only the Raiders have done that, right? In recent memory.
Yeah, with Janikowski, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, somebody just drafted a kicker in the 3rd or 4th round not that long ago.
Janikowski was what? Was he 2nd round?
I think he was a high 2nd rounder. It was.
I thought he was first round.
Hold on.
I thought they drafted him in the 1st round.
It may have even been late first. No, I remember everyone was shocked, and then for a couple of years, it looked like a pretty smart move because they were having him try 77 yarders.
Well, and I think it would have stayed a smart move if Janikowski had 2 brain cells to rub together. But I mean, his off-field problems started impacting his on-field performance. If he could have
I agree with you, Bob. I need to research that a little bit. Just like, how does college kicking success equate to success in the NFL?
Yeah.
Well,
the Browns hold on. In 2022, the Browns selected LSU kicker Cade York in the 4th round.
Yeah,
that's the most recent one.
That's not that unusual.
Derek, I think you might be thinking about someone, and I might be off on this, but I seem to recall the Bucks picking a kicker quite high, like day 2, and the guy completely
Robert Aguayo.
Yes.
In 2016 was drafted, I want to say, in the 2nd round. 3rd round.
All right. I'm actually going to commit to do this. I'm going to do a little research and look at like the top 20 kickers in the NFL and find out what their journeys are and how they ended up on the team they're on. I think that's really an interesting thing to dig into a little bit.
Do it on your home computer so that your research doesn't work computer.
Too soon.
Don't feel bad, Mark. I left all my notes at work, which probably tells you what we're not being very productive at work, but we'll leave that for another conversation.
For the record, I have all my notes at work too, but I'm sitting in my office at the moment.
Yeah, I kind of am too. Mine was a computer issue, but it was also a self-inflicted wound.
Well, here's the big surprise of the night, guys, as we wrap up. We talked about a lot of Iowa players. Like, what's that about? I guess
I did notice that. Yeah,
we're so over Alabama and Ohio State now. We're gonna Iowa's our baby now. We're gonna.
I did look at Henry Tutua out of
Alabama.
And I've even mocked him at Washington in the 2nd round a couple of times, but I feel like his real value is somewhere between our second round and third round pick. You know, because that third round pick is compensatory, there's kind of this gulf in there between the second and the third round picks that makes it feel like we're waiting forever. I want to say there's 50 picks between the two.
Yeah, 47 and 97.
I'm thrilled we have a full slate, man. It's been a while since we.
Okay, so Derek said that to open the and I don't want to throw shade at Derek. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but Derek said that to start this thing, and I thought, you know, I feel like we've had better years than that. So I went and pulled up. Last year we had 8, believe it or not. The year before that we had like 11. Now, granted,
yeah, but what were the picks though? I mean, you're talking about 2 7s and 2 6.
A 1, a 2, 2 3s. They were St. Just and De'Ami Brown, by the way. A 4, who was John Bates. A 5, who was Derek Forrest. Yes, thank you. A 6, Cameron Cheeseman. And then,
Hold
seven,
on. You say that to be funny, but until I hear his name during a game, that is a quality draft pick. I'm just saying. I wasn't
trying to be funny, Derek. I really appreciate Cameron Cheeseman.
We got to get better with our day 2 picks, man.
And then 3 7th round picks.
3 7s. Yeah, exactly.
3 7s, and then 3 years ago, the Chase Young year, we had 8 picks again. So we've had more than 7 picks in the last 4, last 5 drafts. It's been a long time. It's 2026 was the last time.
2026. We're not there yet, brother.
No, 2016. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, even then we have 8.
I think the secret to that is we don't believe in free agency, so we don't ever actually, and we don't trade for anyone that's decent. Yeah, so we just keep our picks.
But hold on. If I'm remembering correctly, I think in multiple drafts we have traded back on draft day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we've gone into a couple with like 6 picks.
Yeah.
And come out the other end with 8 or 9. You're absolutely right, Derek. That's fair. I'm just looking at this and going, it's been quite a while since we had less than 7.
Well, this year's draft, the team would do well to hit on more than they don't, since we were not able to be real players in free agency because of the ownership situation. The draft this year, in terms of what we leave in the cupboard for new ownership and probable new coaches in a year or two, this is a big draft. They need to do well.
Well, to be fair, I think that's bullshit that the ownership situation had anything to do with it. What had everything to do with was the Deron Payne situation, because you're telling me they can hand Deron Payne $80 million, but the ownerships they didn't want to sign Chase Young, and that we can get into that contingent.
Well, I would just disagree on that. I think if this was 5 years ago, we are going heavy after Derek Carr. We're probably going heavy after Jimmy Garoppolo. And
we might be going heavy after Derek Carr if we had not screwed the pooch on national television, with Carson Wentz. I mean, I think that had a big.
All fair.
They realized I cannot go out and spend a bunch of money on a vet.
All fair, but you guys don't think that our ownership situation affected how aggressive we would be in free agency? I'm surprised to hear you say that, Derek. Do the rest of you agree with that?
I'm of 2 minds. We, outside of Carson Wentz, we haven't been staggeringly aggressive in 3 years. Think about last year's free agency signings. Think about the free agency signings of Ron Rivera's first year. He brought in solid character guys who were going to change the tone in the locker room.
Except for Will Jackson.
Except for Will Jackson, but you see how that worked out, right? Again,
no, I mean, this has not been an aggressive free agency front office the last 3 years. I agree with that. This year, I got the impression I never expected them to be very aggressive this year, and
I feel like
that I've heard and read seems to support that no one really thinks we were going to be players just because of that.
I think there's a lot of factors, but I don't think it helped to have a franchise that's a public relations disaster with a semi-criminal.
Right, and it's not like we didn't spend. It's not like we didn't spend money. We're up against the cap. We have $3.5 million left in cap space. We were a top 10 team coming into the free agency, so it's not like we weren't allowed to spend the money.
We're not known as a premier free agency destination, guys. I mean, and
That
the only
is,
reason,
yeah, no one's suggesting that we are.
And,
so
and
I think that's part of it though, is
I'm
And it worked
okay
in our
with that.
favor because we could have Russell Wilson that right now.
I'm okay with that. I mean, for years we were the preeminent free agency destination, right? We were the team, we were the first team everybody talked about when any big name came up for years, and we were all fed up with it because it never worked. And now it feels like we're kind of throwing a little bit of shade because the team's backed off and theoretically being a little more cerebral about our free agency plan.
that's kind of a straw man argument though, man.
And
But
maybe it is, maybe it
both
is,
things
but
can be true at the same time, like overpaying for guys that are past their prime, and then bringing in like guys off the street who really weren't very good where they came from. There's a lot of ground between those two those 2 points.
And there's the stark difference between being willing to spend money and not knowing how to do it, and
Right.
bringing in all the wrong guys, all the has-beens, and being willing to spend money and be creative with your cap management and all that to bring in good players. And there have been some this offseason, there was a few teams, right, that were pretty creative cap wise and brought in and really improved themselves in free agency. We sat on our hands even more than we usually. That's been my impression anyway. We really sat on our hands, and
Look,
that didn't surprise me at all this year.
Mark, you're not wrong, but this group has never been proven. It has never shown us that they can be creative with the cap.
Yeah.
Right? Like we could have done more. Yeah, we could have, but this front office doesn't appear like they're capable of doing more.
We still could. We still could. I mean, we could.
With
we could
what?
turn some of John out. We could turn some of John Allen's money into guaranteed money, and that would shift the cap considerably. I have seen a couple of estimates out there where they could do things with John Allen and Leno and one other player, and I forget who it is, and free up enough money to actually.
Logan Thomas is the other player, and Rouye.
Thomas.
Those four guys could free up 20 million, and I'm just a fat guy sitting on a couch watching this shit on my computer. But that's the point. Is we watch teams like the Ravens, who are getting ready to pay their starting quarterback $33 million, who doesn't even want to play there, pay Odell Beckham 15 fully guaranteed. Like, where's the money coming from? They weren't supposed to have that much money. Our front office doesn't have that. Like, until they prove that they have that, why have we not restructured Logan Thomas? Why have we not restructured Chase Rouye? Why have we not restructured Jesus, now my brain just went sideways. Kendall Fuller. That was the other one. Why have we not restructured
I know
guys?
why. I have a theory as to why.
Because they want to let them.
Because there's no front office right now. There's nobody signing the checks. There's no one signing the checks. He's in London or on a yacht in the Mediterranean somewhere. It's a dysfunctional front office this year. I would have been shocked if they had tried to be aggressive and creative, even if they had that tendency when he was here.
I think you can make the argument we were very aggressive. We were the very first team to slap a franchise tag on our own free agent.
And an extension, I guess.
Right.
Maybe.
And we were the very first team to sign that guy to an extension before the market for defensive tackle set itself. We actually helped set the market for defensive tackle by throwing money at Daron Payne.
But that's not really free agency. That's managing your current roster, which I agree with you. They've done a good job with that.
He could technically, John, he could go talk to anybody. He was a free agent, and we sat down at the table and bargained in good enough faith.
No, he couldn't talk to anybody. He was on the tag, brother. He can't.
No, he was on the. You can totally go talk to somebody and work out a trade, Derek.
Not on the franchise. Not on the exclusive franchise tag. You can't. On the non-exclusive tag.
I thought he was on the non-exclusive.
No, he was on the exclusive tag.
I think we all agree that the team could be a lot more aggressive.
Sure.
In free agency and not. I mean, it does feel like we're always sitting on the sidelines watching other teams grab.
Well, it's not just
their talent level.
It's not just
if you're not going to up your talent level, why fucking do anything in free agency at all? Why not just?
And it's not just free agency. It's we're playing Madden. Curtis Samuel, Kendall Fuller, Logan Thomas, Chase Rouye, 4 guys. You could look at their contracts and you can restructure them. Guys that you don't hate having on the team for the next 2 to 3 seasons. but you can move money around to make it make sense and free up
Or-
some. But it's
or
like,
cut
well, they
'em.
already signed that contract, so
That
we
goes back
can't
to
do
Mark's
anything
point,
until it
though. You got to
expires.
have the money. You got to have a guy to stroke the check. And right now, Dan doesn't want to stroke a check. Even
Yeah,
the
that-
guys we signed aren't getting their bonuses until what, May 18th or something?
Yeah,
Well, and the whole reason I launched into that was, and I'll circle back around to it. We just spent 2 hours. We are not unaware, dear listeners and watchers, that we've been at this for 2 hours. The reason that I even went down this road is this is an important draft for this franchise for the foreseeable future. They need to hit and stock the cupboard a bit for whatever comes next.
Got to
but
do
I'll-
better in the middle rounds, man. Day 2,
But
we
you know
Word.
good and well, they're not thinking that way, Mark. They're thinking we got to do well for this year because we want to keep our jobs.
Well, right, they are, and I think that'll impact how they make their choices. As a fan of the franchise who plans to be around long after this current regime is gone, this is a really important draft for the next 5 years of this team.
Agreed.
All right, last year we called the Jamin Davis pick. Which is going to be the pick that we look back on and say we nailed it? Which of the guys we mentioned tonight is that guy?
Maybe that's for next week when we do our mock draft. Isn't that next week, gentlemen?
yeah, next week.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
We've picked Mark, you have one. Who's got two?
I think I do.
I know I have three. So Paul, you have four?
Yeah, I got 4.
And
I'm
then
bringing
John
up
has
the
five.
rear with who the hell, I don't know who any of these guys are, but I'll take a stab at it.
Hey, that's what we hit on last year. We hit on Brian Robinson, right? In like the third.
Yes.
A lot of
Yep.
tight ends in that 5th round, Bone.
Yeah, you're right. It was Robinson last year. Davis the year before, I think. But
Yep.
So any listeners that are not a part of BG Obsession, it would be cool. Come on by. There's a contest up currently. It's the Predict the Draft contest. You can come on, put on your own mock draft. I want to say that the last 2 winners have had barely broken double-digit points because of how difficult it is to predict this. So you don't have to be a draft expert. Just have some fun with it. So anybody who is listening, jump on. Please put on a submission and have some fun with it, because it is a fun thing to do on draft day. If you can nail one of these picks, it's kind of intriguing and unique. And we get together. I know I'll be here Thursday and Friday doing the BGO draft chat. I will not be Saturday. We'll be traveling to the beach, so I can launch the room for as best I can. But we can get together, do the Zoom chat, and hang out and watch the draft together. Just no spoilers, or I'll kick you.
good job tonight, guys. Got
Thanks,
some-
gentlemen. We'll see you next week.
Enjoyable.
All right,
guys.
boys.